This week on Quality Digest Live, we chat with Intertek's Christine Forcier about medical device standards.
Plus, how about a management system that just says, get her done? That and more when we come back.
Get her done.
Today's sponsor of Quality Digest Live is Sparta Systems. TrackWise by Sparta Systems enables quality, manufacturing, and regulatory affairs professionals to streamline processes, consolidate redundant systems, and reduce manual operations for increased revenue. Visit spartasystems.com.
Welcome back to this is Quality Digest Live, right? For
right.
March 16th, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
I think that you had just gotten off the plane. And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. Well, sometimes...
Hey, wait a minute.
What?
Aren't you going to ask?
What? About what? About that?
Yeah. Don't you want to know what that is?
No.
Okay.
Because we'll find out later.
I mean, it's like this big thing sitting on the desk here.
It's like a
I mean, sometimes Laurel brings flowers. I bring in an irrigation pump. So,
but you know, that's perfect. That's Laurel and that's you. Yes. I mean, it works out exactly right.
There you go.
All right, Dirk. Well, thank you for starting me off so perfectly into this first story. Because, you know, sometimes at the end of the day, doesn't it seem like you haven't accomplished much?
Yes.
Or does it seem like you haven't accomplished much?
I have that feeling.
Well, if you're like most people, you want to feel like you actually got some work done, right? All of us do. Now, in one of this week's top stories, Jason Womack gives us 4 common sense suggestions on how to make your hard work really count, right? We all want that. First, I'm going to go through these 4.
And we actually have some slides here as well.
We have some slides, so we can go through them that way as well. First, don't overwrite your email. In other words, don't waste your time or the recipient's. Get to the point quickly and use action verbs and subject lines so the recipient knows what needs to happen before the email's even open. That's a good one. I should take that one to heart myself. Quit overstaying at meetings. That's an excellent one. A lot of time wasted in meetings. That's self-explanatory, of course. Get in, get out. If you have a call, if you have to call a 1-hour meeting and at 30 minutes you said all that needs to be said, hey, end it. Call it good.
Don't sit around and BS for the next 30 minutes. Just get done.
Get her done, right. Set your own deadlines and stick to them. Now, I like this one a lot. Self-imposed deadlines. You set your own deadlines for when a task needs to be finished. It's kind of a mind game with yourself. You kind of make a game of it. You play it and you make sure that you can meet that goal.
Yeah, just as if somebody else set a deadline for you, you set your own.
You do it for yourself. And if somebody else sets a deadline, maybe you set your own a week before that in order that you make sure you make it and you have a little bit of lead time. That's a good advice. And finally, this is, I think, the most important one of all. Know when it's time to ask for help. Now, some of us, many of us here, we're just problem solvers. We want to fix it ourselves. We don't want to bug anybody else with it. Now, as good as that might feel, sometimes it's a real time waster. I do this with you because I should come to you many times for help with some of my technical issues and I don't. And then you have to untangle what I messed up. So
ask for help.
That's some good advice. So, Dirk, those are 4 simple things you can do that really make sure that your work counts. And I think those are things that we all should take to heart.
Yeah, I mean, I love these stories. You know, we get a lot of these where it's just 4 or 5 simple little lessons that you know, sometimes they just make so much common sense. You know, I mean, it's just stuff that we all know, but we don't practice when we're in our workplace. We practice them at home, strangely enough.
That's right. Simplify it.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Another story this week. Currently, solar cells, our next story, I should say, is from NIST. And this has to do with organic solar cells and how they're actually getting closer to market. So currently, solar cells made of organic materials lag far behind in conventional silicon-based photovoltaic cells in terms of output, in terms of electrical output. But if we could reasonably develop efficient organic cells, they would have some distinct advantages. For instance, they would cost far less to produce, they could cover larger areas, and conceivably they could be recycled more easily, which is kind of an issue with existing photovoltaics. So the folks at NIST and the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory are studying solar cells made up by stacking up hundreds of alternating layers of 2 different organic materials: zinc, phthalocyanine, and carbon-60, which is otherwise known as buckyballs.
Our old friend Buckminster Fuller.
Buckminster Fuller, that's right. Those little
guy.
carbon-60 atoms, you probably, molecules, you probably studied them in physics. Light that strikes this film excites all of its layers from top to bottom, causing them to give up electrons that flow between the buckyball and the phthalocyanine layers, creating an electric current. But here's a problem. If the layers are too thin, they don't generate enough current.
Okay.
And if they're too thick, the electrons actually get trapped within the layers, and you still don't generate enough current. So you got to find the optimum thickness, which they have. It turns out that 2 nanometers is the thickness that gives the best performance. And there's just another problem. How do you deal with these thin layers? The team is still working on how to best incorporate these thin layers into devices so that you can connect to them and actually get the energy out. So basically, we know how to create electricity, we just don't know how to get to it.
Interesting. But
Interesting.
It will be figured out.
But it's promising. It's promising.
Yeah, interesting. You know, NIST always has these great stories. We love to bring them to the audience because they're applicable to kind of the mindset of what we do, that problem solving, untangling kind of mindset. So
and plus, we've got a lot of geeks out there who want to know the science stuff, so I'm always
many of us here. So
glad to geekify you.
That's great. All right, great. Thanks, Derek. Okay, well, that's the news for the week. But we are going to now jump into our feature articles. We had a couple of really good features this week.
Yes, we did.
And we're going to start with one from Christine Forcier. And Christine Forcier is with Intertech, and Christine is primarily works with Intertech within medical device and cosmetics.
Right, and her article was breaking into major markets for medical device manufacturers.
Thank you. Now she is Intertech's business assurance program manager for, as I say, for medical and the cosmetic sectors. And now this is a topic that we've been talking about pretty often on the show the last couple of weeks. So we've had a couple of articles that have gotten to this, kind of from some different angles. And we're gonna bring Christine on, and we're gonna talk about this and explore those angles and talk about what the process is and how registrars like Intertech help to manage this. So,
exactly.
Christine, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We have Christine here via Skype. And yes, thank you for giving up some of your Friday to join us here on Quality Digest Live. Now, Christine, we, as I mentioned to you earlier, have been talking on the show lately a lot about medical device, but from a slightly different angle than where you bring it from. We've been talking about the IEC 60601-1 standard, and you talk in your article about, and you work in your work, you work with ISO 13485. Can you just kind of, so we set the ground a little bit, tell us very briefly the difference between those two standards and what people need to know about them?
Sure, yes. The IEC 6601 standard has to do with electrical product safety. And the ISO 13485 standard relates to the quality management system for medical devices. So one addresses product safety and the other one management system.
So, and your perspective on this again is that you take it from the ISO 13485 perspective. You work to help register and audit medical device companies for ISO 13485, and that's your part of
Exactly.
This. Gotcha. Okay. Well, exactly. Let's jump right into this. Now, can you give us an example of a product that might be considered a medical device in one market, but not another? This is an interesting question that came up. Can you kind of get to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Well, a classic example would be a product intended to treat signs of aging. Although definitions of a medical device in the EU and in North America look very similar, the interpretation is different or is applied differently. So in the EU, because aging is not a disease or a medical condition, they would not consider it a medical device. In the US or Canada, these may be regulated as medical devices. And the same product would be regulated as a cosmetic product in the EU.
Well, that brings up a good point. We talk about kind of classification of devices, and that's a very upstream element of this. It's actually, I think the first step is really the classification. Can you talk about why that needs to be done so early and why maybe it can't be done later in the process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, because major markets have adopted a risk-based regulatory system, whereby the level of scrutiny exercised by the regulator is proportional to the risk level of that product. That's why it's important to classify the device early on in the process, because the higher the risk, the more information is required to demonstrate safety and effectiveness. So in other words, the risk class really determines the requirements. Everything flows from that. So that's how you get the conformity assessment requirements imposed on you as a manufacturer.
And what are some common errors that somebody would make in terms of classifying or thinking that they're classifying their device? What are some common hiccups that device manufacturers encounter out there that you've seen?
The most common one I see is that manufacturers often assume the classification in the U.S. applies elsewhere. So, they may have a product classification by the FDA, and they talk about having a Class 2 device when, Class 2 doesn't even exist in the EU system. They have a Class 2A and 2B. So that's when we know that the manufacturer hasn't looked at the classification rules and hasn't determined the classification for that specific market. So this has to be done, the exercise has to be done for every market. Every regulator has a different set of rules. You can't just assume equivalence.
And what's the risk? We talk about risk all the time. What's the risk of that from the perspective not only of the manufacturer, but in terms of the user as well, in terms of not properly classifying it? Is it more of a financial risk, or is it a risk that is in terms of maybe something escaping into the market that shouldn't be?
The risk is more for the manufacturer to experience delays in getting the approval, because if it means that if it's the wrong classification, they're going down the wrong path, so they may not be producing the documentation that's required, and there may be more back and forth than if they start with the right classification and understand early on what's going to be required of them.
There was a really interesting chart that you had in your article, and I encourage everyone out there to read Christine's article, which again appeared earlier this week in Quality Digest. Christine Forcier's article on medical device standards. The benefits of using the 5 steps that were in that chart in terms of major market requirements and looking at them in parallel. What are the benefits of doing that?
The main benefit is to save time and avoid delays down the road. For example, when a manufacturer prepares a technical file, it's easy to address, for example, safety and effectiveness requirements in Canada, EU, Japan at the same time because they overlap. Mm-hmm. So if you develop that technical file, for example, just addressing one market, then later on you'll have to go back and revise a technical file when it's much simpler to look at those in parallel and create a technical file that will address all market requirements. And the same applies when developing a quality management system. So again, it's more efficient to develop a process that will address all applicable requirements at the same time than trying to add on later.
Now, Christine, as I referenced at the beginning of our interview with you here, we've had a lot of chatter, and we've been covering this issue a lot in Quality Digest, in our newsletter, as well as us here on the show. This idea of medical device requirements, standards, again, more through the prism of 60601-1, but I think it's applicable to 13485 as well, that there's a significant cost factor involved here, and not only the cost of developing medical devices, but at the end of that game where you develop it and then you have to go through the process of ensuring that it's compliant and that it meets a standard like whether it be 13485 or 60601-1. So, there's questions about the cost benefit structure of that. So, how would you address questions which we've gotten about the cost that it takes to have a registrar certify you, make sure that you're in compliance with one of these standards?
Well, the cost, it really depends. It's a case by case. It really, for certification, it depends on the size of the company, but also complexity, risk of the products, how many processes there are. So there are many factors that we consider. There's a mandate table that's imposed on registrars. So that's really the starting point. And that's really what determines cost. But there's also benefits to getting registered. You get the benefits of having an independent party testing your system, identifying risk area. So, maybe it's hard to measure the savings or the value, but there is definitely a cost-benefit analysis to be made by manufacturers.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, Christine, thank you. We're going to leave it off there, but I really appreciate you joining us here today on Quality Digest Live, giving us your perspective on ISO 13485, a valuable standard, obviously something anyone in the medical device field needs to be well aware of.
Right.
And certainly we appreciate your expert insight into that, Christine, and we look forward to chatting with you soon and hearing more of your thoughts in upcoming issues of Quality Digest Daily and here on our show as well.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Christine.
Well, good stuff there. I think that we really get to the heart of some of these issues that a lot of the readers are addressing is why and what the benefit of it is and why you have to. It's not a choice really in many matters.
Depending on your market, there are sometimes you don't really have a choice as to whether you're registered. If you want to go into certain markets, you actually have no choice.
Well, and there is. I think she made a good point of this. There's a significant benefit to that expert third-party analysis of that and making sure that your device meets those standards, because we know, quality escape in this sector is not only potentially harmful, obviously, to thousands and thousands of health consumers, but also financially the burden could be well into the millions.
Right, and I think an issue that we do need to delve into more deeply probably doesn't apply to 13485 so much as some of the other medical device standards is the cost.
Yes,
and I think that is something that we want to pursue a little bit further in the future.
We'll be doing more of it down the line. So
yeah,
it's great.
Okay, we had another what I thought was an interesting article this week by Mark Hamill,
our good friend.
ROWE, ROWE versus Lean, my 2 cents. In this article, Mark Hamill questioned the efficacy of a results-only work environment. That's what ROWE stands for. For those who haven't heard of ROWE, it's been around since, I believe, about 2003, when the idea was introduced to Best Buy's corporate offices by Jody Thompson and Callie Ressler. Here's how Best Buy describes it on their website. This is just a brief synopsis of ROWE. As long as the work is getting done to the quality standards expected by leadership, peer employees and customers alike, people are free to do what they want, when they want. We believe that when employees are given the freedom to manage their own time, productivity increases, customer satisfaction and engagement improve, and employees become more loyal to the company. This is good for our people and good for business. In other words, what they're saying is, I don't care how you get there, just as long as you get there on time and with the results I expect. Now, I want to delve a little bit more deeply in this because it's going to touch a little bit on what some things that Mark had to say. So here is actually from the Best Buy website a few bullet points that actually have to do with what ROWE actually looks like
and how it's actually
how it's implemented. Yeah, let me get to my slides here. Okay, first of all, people at all levels stop doing any activity that is a waste of their time, the customer's time or the company's money. Remember, this is your own decision that you're doing yourself. Employees have the freedom to work at any way they want. Arriving at the workplace at 2 p.m. is not considered coming in late. Leaving the workplace at 2 p.m. is not considered leaving early. You are in control of what meetings you attend. Yay!
Wow.
It's okay to grocery shop on a Wednesday morning, catch a movie on a Tuesday afternoon, or take a nap on a Thursday afternoon, and a Friday afternoon, and a Monday afternoon, and a Tuesday afternoon, and a Wednesday afternoon. Okay. Nobody feels guilty, overworked, or stressed out. Each person is empowered to discuss reasonable workload and expectations with their manager. There is no judgment about how you spend your time. So, this all sounds pretty cool, right?
Sounds great in theory.
Sounds great in theory. Well, actually, they're doing it at Best Buy corporate headquarters.
Okay.
And the question is, does it work? Can it work anywhere? By the way, like I said, this is really being implemented at corporate headquarters, but even on their website, they acknowledge that they haven't figured out how to deploy ROWE in their distribution or retail sites. And that is kind of what is at the heart of Mark Hamill's questions. If you look at most of his comments, the concern seems to be about whether this system works in a more strict, process-oriented environment. So Mark says, my biggest concern, and it's not trivial, is whether or not it promotes continuous flow or if it is subordinated to non-levelized schedules of empowered workers. Also, if it does not promote adherence to standard work, that's important, How do you ensure that the system performs as designed relative to timing, output, and so forth?
And again, if you're just joining us right now, we're talking about Mark Hamill's article, ROWE versus Lean, My 2 Cents, that appeared in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. So just wanted to reset that. Okay.
By the way, Mark's question is really good because it applies to any self-directed work system. I think Ryan Day added a comment in here below the article. He says, in every work environment I've encountered, there are a set of prescribed parameters that define the expected outcome of an employee's input. Sometimes every last detail of input is set forth as a process. Other times it's, I just don't care how you do it, just get her done. I absolutely agree with Dan on this, and I look at ROWE in this way. ROWE views the employee, I believe, as a black box. Here's a set of inputs, customer requirements, management requirements, peer requirements, and then there is the output of the black box. Do we really care as management what goes on inside the black box? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. A case for say maybe we do is if an employee is beating himself or herself to death in order to accomplish, even though the accomplishment is what we expect, maybe they're going to have burnout, right? So maybe we do care what goes on in the black box. I don't know. I mean, I think that is a subject for discussion, but I like the concept of this because it's really the way we lead our own lives until we come to work when all of a sudden we throw all these rules out the window.
It's great. Like I say, in theory, this is wonderful. It sounds great. I have some concerns about it. I have concerns about people feeling jealous, perhaps in some ways, of their team members, and
because perhaps their team member,
they're really
based on their
it.
job.
Yeah.
Well, maybe based on their
maybe,
job, they can have this flexibility.
Yeah.
Maybe your job is so intricate that you just can't have that flexibility in order to get stuff done.
Or deadline driven. I mean, you know, in our shop here, I mean, we're obviously very, very heavily deadline driven. It may not be as easy for some of us to do this as it would be for others. So in theory, I think it's great. I think that it would need to be somewhat. The culture of the organization would dictate somewhat how this would play out. So,
right.
But it's it's great stuff to talk about because I think this really gets to the heart of what we want to talk about here at Quality Digest is ways to succeed, ways to get your team on board and have more success.
Exactly.
Better quality work.
Yeah, it was an interesting article.
It's great.
I like this. It really does tie into some of the other topics we talked about, including like self-directed work teams and even actually the Harada method, which is something we'll be talking about also.
More next week.
Okay, we're kind of running late here, and I'm just going to jam right into this.
I see you're getting right into our tech corner this week, which is from our friends at Olympus. So.
Yes, we're going to look at. Get organized here, boy. This is going to be interesting. Okay, so what we're going to look at today is a borescope or a videoscope, or a video borescope, depending on your nomenclature. This one happens to come from Olympus. It is the IPLEX UltraLite, and I'm trying to get all organized here. I got the snake I got to deal with. If you've seen borescopes before, your typical borescope has what is called a pistol grip, and it sounds like exactly what it looks like. It's like you're holding a gun. Olympus has gone with a slightly different shape here. Olympus calls this the brandy snifter.
I like that.
Grip, because if you'll see here, I'm holding it just like you might hold a brandy snifter. I wish. Speaking of ROWE, I think I'll knock off after this and go have a brandy. This grip is very interesting. I got to tell you, this unit only weighs 700 grams. We're only talking about a pound and a half. This grip allows me to, at my fingertip, have a camera trigger. At my thumb, I've got the articulator. You can probably see it here. As I move my thumb, oops, there we go, move my thumb, it's articulating the tip. Also at my thumb, I've got brightness control, zoom control, and actually there's another joystick down here that allows me to control some software functions if I'm going to use them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a couple of really simple inspection tasks, and in order to allow you to see what the camera is seeing, I'm actually not going to hold this in my hand. I'm actually going to just put it down on the desk here, and we'll switch to a camera view. And what we're going to do now, if we just switch to the camera view here, I'm actually going to inspect the impellers of an irrigation pump. I'm going to snake this. I'm going to snake my. There we go. I'm going to snake my insertion tube right down into here. First of all, let me tell you, I am using a 120-degree direct view near focus lens. There are several other lenses available that go with the IPLEX UltraLite, including a 40 degree, 80 degree, and as I said, 120 degree direct view. There is also a 80 degree and 120 degree right angle lens, and both of these are available in both near view and far view. By the way, near view in this case allows me to focus from 4 millimeters, that's practically touching the object, to 190 millimeters and that is a really large depth of focus. Okay, so I'm inside, I'm looking at my impeller blades here. You should be able to see that, perfect, okay. I can go around, I can look at the leading edges of my impeller blades in my irrigation pump. I can see they actually look, whoops, let's get over to here. There we go, where'd it go? Here we go. We can see the leading edge looks clean, no chips taken out of it. That's a common problem with irrigation pumps. You're sucking in gravel and your impellers can get pretty munged up after a while. These look really good. So now very easily I've actually been able to go into and look at very nicely lit, very crisp view of my impeller blades. Now imagine this could actually be going inside a jet engine or inside a helicopter engine to do non-contact, non-destructive, non-take-apart inspection.
Exactly.
Now I'm going to do another inspection function here, and this time I'm going to document what I'm doing. I'm going to look at what I've got here now. This is just your plain old spigot, yard spigot. I'm going to look at the valve, both the valve and the valve seat. So again, using my 120 degree view lens, I'm going to snake that down, and now you can see I'm right, there we go. We're actually looking now, you can see I'm actually looking at the valve itself. We can see the rubber, looks nice, there's no cracks, it's not worn, it's not indented. Actually, while I'm in here, I can look at the housing of the valve, and I can see there's no cracks in the brass and everything. Looks pretty clean. I want to take a picture of this for documentation purposes. So I come over, and I press my trigger, which is at an awkward position now since I'm not really holding the device in my hand. But there we go. I press the button and I take a picture of the unit. Now I can pull this back out. Now what I want to do is look at the valve seat, but what I'm going to do is replace the lens. So if we come over here to our gauge cam here, there we go. I can show you what I'm doing. I'm going to remove my direct view lens, and I'm going to replace it with a right angle lens. So a couple things about these lenses. As I mentioned, there's several different lenses, I think 7 or 8 different lenses. The lens itself has got an integral LED. Every lens has got its own LED built in, so you're not piping light down the insertion tube. The light is actually at the point where you're doing the work because it's in the lens itself. Each lens is made up of 3 elements, 3 lenses go into an objective, so 3 pieces of glass. Olympus is known for its the quality of its optics, and that is one of the things that you're seeing here. These are very nice lenses, give you a very crisp view. That in conjunction with the video processing built into the unit itself gives you very nice images. Now, one last thing I want to point out, this is a safety issue. These objectives go on over 2 sets of threads. And the purpose for the threads, 2 sets of threads, is that if you only had 1 set of threads and your objective was to come loose, you might lose your objective inside your $1 million helicopter engine, which means you'd have to take that sucker apart, right? You wouldn't want to do that. So by having 2 sets of threads, when you put the objective on, it goes over 1 set of threads. That kind of loosely attaches it, but it's secure. The second set of threads actually put it into place, engage the LED, and so forth. If it was to come loose while you were doing an inspection and disengage itself from the first set of threads, you would actually get an indication on the screen telling you that you've come disconnected, which allows you time to pull it back out and the second set of threads keep it in place. Okay, so let's do a quick inspection of a valve seat. So I'm going to put this back in here. I got my right angle 120 degree lens. I snake this in there. Now we're looking at the valve seat. Now that I've got the valve seat, I actually want to record the valve seat. And what I'm going to do is find the trigger, because unfortunately, here, hold on 1 second. In order to get to the trigger easily, I'm going to have to lift this thing up. It's really meant to be operated with my hand here. So I'm going to press and hold for 3 seconds. I'll come back and show you what the screen looks like. When I press and hold for 3 seconds, it asks me if I want to record a movie. I say yes, and now what I'm doing is I'm actually recording a video of this valve seat. So as I maneuver around and look all around the valve seat, I can record it. When I'm done recording, I would simply, and I'll come back to our camera here, I will turn recording off, and now, come back to our gauge cam here. Daniel, sorry I'm doing all that switching on you. Now if I hit the view button, now we're actually playing the movie that I just recorded. I can toggle now to other images that I've taken. There's the still image that I took earlier. If I press and hold my view button, I get a thumbnail view, which allows me to kind of go through and select all the images that I've taken before and play them back. Okay, so this is a very cool instrument. Some other things about it, it can be either battery or AC operated. The battery lasts about 90 minutes. There's a 4 gigabyte SD card to store your images. Obviously, once you've stored your images, you can connect it to a computer, download it, download your images, download your movies, and so forth. IP55 rated, so dust and moisture resistant, shock resistant, Gorilla Glass on the front of this. As I mentioned, it weighs only 700 grams, only 1.5 pounds. Very comfortable to hold, very easy to use. The thumb actuator actually works really well. So, bottom line. 17 grand for the basic unit. That's what you see here. That's what you see here. Basic unit, single lens, battery pack, AC adapter, carrying case, so forth. If you were to get one of these with all the lenses, a rigid insertion tube instead of a 2-meter flexible tube, you'd be running probably 30, 35 grand, something like that, for a fully blown Lexus. But this is, borescopes are actually invaluable tools if you're having to do internal inspection of complex parts.
Yeah, I mean, anything we just saw here today and everything
and typically these are used in the petrochemical industry, oil industry, process industries, and aeronautics. I mentioned helicopter engine. I was reading a blog, somebody uses one of these to do internal inspection of helicopter engines. So where you don't want to have to take something apart. So
very flexible tool.
Yeah, so again, that was the Olympus IPLEX UltraLite.
UltraLite, that's it, from Olympus. Olympus Energy. It's great. Thank you, Dirk. Another great Tech Corner. It's been a while since we had a Tech Corner. So
well, we've got a bunch of them lined up.
We got a bunch of them lined up, so make sure you tune in upcoming episodes for upcoming episodes of Tech Corner on Quality Digest Live. All right, well, that's the show for this week, but before we wrap up, I'd like to, of course, thank our sponsor, Sparta Systems. For more than 15 years, Sparta's TrackWise software has enabled professionals to improve processes and increase revenue. Please take a moment to visit www.spartasystems.com to learn more. And if you're interested in learning how audit management solutions can help reduce audit time and cost, mitigate risk, and improve product quality and safety, check out the free audit management white paper by clicking on the Sparta Systems banner just below or just to the right of the player right here. So check that out.
That's right. Also coming up soon is our next episode of Technorazzi Live, which will be broadcasting from Hexagon Metrology's North American headquarters in North Kingstown, Rhode Island. The event happens live on April 12th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll be demoing Hexagon's newest, yet to be announced product. We're going to have the product rollout right on our show live. Keep an eye on your email. More information on that coming up soon.
That's right, very soon.
Yep.
And then we're, of course, doing a special episode of QDL on the following day, Friday, April 13th, with some unique features and some great guests. So mark your calendars for that as well. And be sure, we've been talking about that for a couple of weeks now, so we want to make sure everybody gets out to both of those great events.
That's right.
In April.
So once again, thank you for joining us for this show. We crammed a lot into it.
Sure did.
Hope it was interesting for you. And guess what? We'll see you again next week.
Next week, have a great St. Patty's Day. We'll see you next week.
Huzzah.
Thank you.